Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Portillo Party of Four. Today gonna do a birth story of my son. So maybe like a week or so ago, I posted the birth story of my daughter, and I just kind of wanted to post my children's birth story just so it's something they have to look back on later in life. And then also I just think it's really cool to share kind of your pregnancy and birth story and hear from others on their experience as well. So let's get into it. So with my son, I actually found out I was pregnant by myself with my daughter. My husband wasn't there. So my husband was at work. My period was late. I was having a couple pregnancy symptoms, nothing like real major, but my period was late, and my period is like clockwork. It's usually like the same time every month. So I thought that was a little suspicious. So took my daughter, who was 1 at the time, with me to Walmart, picked up a pregnancy test, came back home, and took both tests that came in the pack. And right away, before it was even like 2 minutes or anything, they were just like positive, like right away. I was super nervous just because I had a 1-year-old at the time. My 1-year-old was literally with me while I was getting the test, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I might literally have 2 kids in diapers. And it happened. So when my husband came home from work that evening, I did tell him, and I do remember I called my mom and told her when my test was positive. So with my son, I think my mom was the first one to know, and then my husband was the second one to know. Also, I guess if you count my daughter, she was technically the first one to know because she was there with me. But yeah, I was excited. I did want to have more children. I wanted my daughter to have a sibling. It was just sooner than I thought it would happen, since she was just so young in age herself. So, had a really great pregnancy with him. Had way more morning sickness and hormonal, morning sickness and nausea and things like that with my daughter than I did with my son. I think I only got sick like 1 time with my son the entire pregnancy, and it was on like a cup of noodle, and I was like trying to eat it super quick before going into work. So that kind of made me sick too, just because I was eating so fast. But with him, we found out he was a boy at I think about the 12-week mark. And with him, we didn't care either way. We already had a girl. If we had another girl, we would have been perfectly fine with that. We had all of the girl things, so that totally would have been fine, and we would just use hand-me-downs. But we did kind of want a boy just so we could have one of each. So it is really cool how that worked out, where we had one of each. With me at the ultrasound, I remember my mom was there, my daughter, who was 1, and my husband was there. So the 3 of us were there, and they zoomed in, and they were like, what do you think it is? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a boy. So that was super exciting to find out we were going to have a boy. And then with him at his 20-week anatomy scan, there were more like worries or concerns, just like there were with my daughter. So with this time, we already played this game with my daughter where they kept going to her heart. But this time they kept going to his brain, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm having deja vu. Like, this is super scary. So the ultrasound tech, she was going to their heart, then going to the brain, going to his limbs, then going to the brain, and playing that game of back and forth, just kept going to his brain, kept trying to get measurements and everything. And I was thinking, oh my gosh. I was like so anxious, so worried. I was like, please have a skull, please have all the things you need. Oh my gosh, I was so anxious, so worried. And once again, she went and said, I need to go get the doctor. And I was just thinking, oh gosh, no, no, no. So she finished up the scan actually. This time the doctor didn't come in. She finished up the scan, had me go and meet with our doctor directly after the ultrasound. So I was a little emotional, was a little upset. We were worried. At the 20-week ultrasound, it was just my husband, my daughter, and I. I don't think my mom was at that appointment. But the doctor did say that there was some concern because they thought that my son had too much fluid on his brain. So they were saying ventriculomegaly was what they thought he had. It wasn't a lot of extra fluid on his brain, but it was a little bit more than normal. So that was a concern. They wanted me to get a ultrasound with a fetal maternal specialist. That was an hour away from where we live. So I was so worried, so anxious the whole time. I work in healthcare, so I knew if he had fluid on his brain, that probably meant he would need a shunt. That is a major surgery at birth to, drain the fluid off into your brain. So, off of your brain. So that was a huge concern, huge worry. Was hoping everything would be okay, and went to that appointment. The doctor was so, so nice. I only had to go, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times to his appointments, and he would do a way more in-depth ultrasound. The very first appointment, he did mention I would maybe have to get a fetal MRI at an even further location that's like 2.5 hours from where we live, but luckily I did not have to do that. But he took pictures of our son, measured his brain and his ventricles and how much fluid was in them and everything, and he just was keeping an eye on that throughout the pregnancy. And like I said, I think I went 2 or 3 times, and on that third time he said everything had absorbed on its own and he didn't have any more extra fluid on his brain. So that was a huge relief. So happy, so thankful that that worked out, and everything was okay with his brain, and that he didn't need a shunt or anything at first. So that was a huge, huge relief to hear that. And then just kept going to my regular doctor's appointments from there on out. And then with him, I was also working night shift at the hospital. I was gonna work 4 nights in a row. Worked 3 nights in a row, and got off that morning, was really crampy, having some contractions. I had already lost my mucus plug a few days before. And I already had an induction date set. So I was 39 weeks and 5 days when I had, 40 weeks, 5 days. Yes, I was overdue with him. 40 weeks, 5 days with my son when he was born. And so at my 40-week appointment, they had scheduled me to have an induction on a Monday, and I ended up having him that Thursday before Monday on my own. But there was an induction date in play, and I did have an induction date set up for him because he was overdue, which was kind of shocking. I don't know if maybe my due date was maybe a little wrong or what, because my daughter was 5 days early and my son was 5 days late. But yeah. Anyway, so worked 3 night shifts, 12-hour shifts in a row on my feet at the hospital, and got off that morning, went home. I had a 10 o'clock appointment at my OBGYN for a fetal non-stress test, an ultrasound, and something else. I can't remember. I think maybe like a membrane sweep again or something, just to try to get things going on their own. So I didn't go back to sleep or anything. I just stayed up. So I showered. I packed my bag and everything just in case they sent me over, because depending on how the stress test went, they could have sent me over to the hospital. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if the baby is getting stressed, they're not going to wait until this induction date. They'll just send me over. I was having some cramping and a couple contractions here and there, nothing real major. I was like, I just want to be prepared, bring our bags just in case. So we take my daughter over to my mom's, drop her off so that we can go to this appointment. Go into the appointment. First thing they do is the ultrasound. They said, yes, he's super low. Like his head was down. He was in a good spot. Then they go to do the, non-stress test. So they hook me up to the monitors and everything, and I'm having contractions the entire time they are doing this non-stress test. They had me sit in the chair, I don't even know, like maybe 30 minutes or so, and the contractions were getting a little bit more stronger and a little bit more painful. And they kept coming in and checking on me. They were like, it looks like you're having contractions. Like, are you feeling these? Do you notice these? And I said, yeah, I can feel them, but like, they're not terrible. This was my second kid at this point. So I was like, like, okay, they're not like that bad. It was tolerable. So then they were like, okay, well, it looks like you could be like maybe going into labor. We're going to have you meet with the doctor and check you and see how far along you are. So go in to meet with the doctor, and he checks me and he says, you're 4 centimeters and you're having pretty consistent contractions. He said, I think you're going to have this baby today and we're going to send you over to the hospital. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I was so excited. I did not want to get induced. I wanted to have the baby on my own. I didn't want to have to be like going through the whole induction process and all of that. So I was super excited when they said I was already at a 4, because with last baby, it took me forever to get to a 4 to get admitted, and I had to keep walking around all the things to get admitted to get to that 4. And so to hear before I ever walked in the hospital, I was already at a 4, I was like, oh, okay, they would just admit me. So like that was so much easier. And I was actually supposed to go work that night again. So I was scheduled to work 4 nights in a row, worked my 3rd night, had been up once again since like 2 o'clock or 1:30 the day prior. So worked my whole shift, went to my appointment, and they said, okay, let's go to the hospital. So once again, super tired, super exhausted, going on no sleep to go have this baby. So I remember by the time I left there and everything, it was about lunchtime. By the time I did the ultrasound, got checked, did the stress test, all the things, it was about lunchtime. And at that point, I hadn't had breakfast or anything. I was hungry. So had my husband take me by Wendy's on our way to the hospital, because the Wendy's is super close. Stopped by Wendy's. I remember I got like a bacon cheese fry, like a loaded fry at Wendy's, and something else. Ate that, went into the hospital and was going to start getting the admission process going, and kind of see, are they going to admit me? What's going to happen? And my mom was still with my daughter watching her. So and that we were going to tell my mom to come if things were progressing. So go in to get admitted. They're like, yeah, you're like 4.5 centimeters. We're going to admit you. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I could feel the contractions coming. They were pretty regular. Like it was going to happen. So I was like, okay, this is it. This is happening today. So they get me admitted and everything. They're starting to work on my paperwork and get the IV and all that stuff. And so I tell my husband, this is going to happen today. My mom is going to have to come to the hospital. So my mom did not have a car seat for my daughter. So my husband had to leave me at the hospital by myself in labor to go pick up my daughter from my mom's and drop her off with his sister, so that my mom could come to the hospital with me as well. So that I had my mom and my husband were my birth partners. So I was there hanging out, having contractions, walking around, getting things moving. I think by the time they came back, I was at like a 6. Like things were moving. I do remember with this doctor, she said a lot of women were in labor the same time as me. And she said my contractions were every 3 to 4 minutes apart, but she wanted them more like 2 to 3 minutes apart or something. And so I shouldn't have done this. Me working in healthcare, I should have known better. But I was just so sleep deprived. She said, I want to break your water and start you on Pitocin. I should have just let her break my water. I was in labor actively on my own and not done the Pitocin, because the Pitocin set me over the edge. So she breaks my water. And then, because both my kids, my water never broke on its own. Both kids, they had to break my water for me. I don't know why, but they did. So she broke my water. Then she said, we want to start you on this Pitocin. Well, I was already having pretty consistent, painful, purposeful contractions on my own. But she wanted me to start the Pitocin, and I don't know, I just didn't think not to. And I just wanted this baby out because I was overdue. I wanted the baby out. So it was just like, okay. So they start the Pitocin, and pretty much right away, breaking my water and starting this Pitocin. And every 30 minutes or 20 minutes or something, want to up your Pitocin to get things moving. And I just feel like it was just both things too much too quickly, because they both can induce your labor. Oh my gosh. I went from manageable, breathing through the pain, maybe even not needing an epidural because I was doing pretty well on my own, to oh my gosh, this is hardcore. This is heavy. They were giving me some pain medicine to take the edge off. It was not taking the edge off at that point. Before I had started the Pitocin, it was taking the edge off doable. Once I started the Pitocin, they just kept jacking it up. I told the lady, I was like, can we cut this back down? I feel like this is too much. Because I was in labor on my own anyway. So, it got to the point where things were moving pretty quickly, and I was hurting, and I was like, okay, I think we're at the point where, yes, I would like to get an epidural. At this point, I was about 8 centimeters dilated, guys. Things were moving pretty quick at this point. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to get the epidural. I, for some reason, like to flirt on the edge of getting the epidural. I'm always 8.5 before I get it, and they're like, ugh. So at that point, I knew I was about an 8 or so, and I was like, okay, let's get the epidural just in case, because this is starting to get to be a little bit much. So they made me get up to go to the bathroom to empty my bladder. And I remember getting up, walking over to go try to pee. And I was hooked up to the IV pole of my Pitocin. And I remember just standing there and crying for a little bit because I felt like I couldn't move. I felt like the pain was just constant. No breaks, no let up, no contractions in between, just constant contraction at that point. And I was just like, I don't think I can get back into the bed. This is hurting so bad. I told my husband, I was like, I just don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can. At that point, the anesthesiologist walked in. He said, we might be too late. And I was like, no, please don't say that. He's like, all right, then you need to hurry and get over here so we can do your epidural. So I'm trying to wheel my IV pole and get over there, hobble over so I can get this epidural. Sign the paperwork. He was really good. He got it the first time. With my daughter, they missed and had to do twice. It didn't take. With him, I think he got in the right spot. It was pretty good when he stuck me, or he was happy with the placement. I think was too far gone at that point, and so I had rang my call bell again maybe 10-15 minutes later and was like, this epidural is not like my last epidural. It's not helping me. I can feel everything still. So he was super nice. The anesthesiologist came back in and he upped my pain medication and my epidural, and that man was a godsend blessing. He knew how tired and miserable I was at that point, and he did me so good because I could not feel anything, stomach down, nothing. I was just like, oh, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I could not feel anything at that point. And that was amazing. I was able to, finally rest a little bit. They still had the Pitocin going. So things were really like going pretty quick at this point. And I remember my nurse checking me at one point saying I was about a 9 to 9.5, and that she was going to come in soon and we could do some practice pushing, but my doctor was currently at home, had left to go take her dog out, so was not in the hospital at all. But the doctor had said that, it could be a while, that I could start doing a couple practice pushes with her and just kind of see how things went. If it looked like I was going too soon, no practice pushes. So at this point, we're just kind of waiting. In the room is my husband, my mom, my dad, and my brother. And we're just kind of talking because I'm feeling good at this point. I got my epidural. I am happy. I am thriving. We are rejuvenated. But I start feeling a lot of pressure, and feeling like I needed to push, feeling like this baby was just going to fall out in the bed kind of a feeling. It was not a good feeling. So I had told my dad and my brother to like get out, go back to the waiting room, told my husband to ring the call bell, get my nurse, because I felt like this baby was just like gonna fall out into the bed because I was on the Pitocin and I was having the contractions. I just felt pretty good. So she comes in. She doesn't even get to check me. She could just see the baby's head. And she's like, don't push. Don't do anything. Close your legs. She said, your doctor right now is not here. Your doctor is on their way back from taking their dog out. She said, this baby is right here. We will not be doing any practice pushing. I don't want you to push at all. And I was feeling pressure like I could push. Like I was feeling like I needed to push. And I was just like, oh gosh, this has never happened to me before. With my daughter, I had to push for so long to get like any progress. With my son, he was just like right there, ready to roll. So literally the doctor finally comes in. She puts my legs in the stirrups. They have the mirror and everything. I can see everything. And she is trying to get her stuff on. She said, go ahead and give a practice push. I give one practice push and you can see his whole hair, his whole head. And she said, no more practice push. She said, I'm not dressed completely. Like when I tell you guys, like this baby was ready to come, he was ready to come. I literally only pushed like 3 times and he came out, literally 3 times, because the first one I just did a little push to practice push and she was like, okay, no more. This is too soon. This is too quick. So then she finally got all her stuff on. She comes over and she said, okay, give me 1 push. I give a second push, like an actual like hard push, and literally like almost all of his head comes out. And she said just 1 more and he'd be out. I give 1 more push and the whole baby just comes out and she lays on my chest. I'm just like, like I couldn't even process how quickly I gave birth to my 8-pound baby who was bigger than my 6-pound baby. Like I just could not even process. Literally, I went from no baby to in 3 pushes, like a couple minutes, a whole baby. Like it was just so crazy and surreal. He had a great cry. He had great color. He looked so good. I do remember with him though, after he was born, I had the shakes, like the kind of like adrenaline rush, like where you're just like shaking uncontrollably after labor. And I do remember with him, I did have some bleeding issues. So they had to keep trying to, my IV went bad. My IV infiltrated where I was getting the Pitocin. And so they had to give me shots of Pitocin to contract my uterus in my leg, which was fine because I couldn't feel my leg. So it's not like I felt it. But they had to give me, I think, 2 shots total in my leg of Pitocin IM to get my uterus to contract. And my blood pressure was a little low. So with him, I did have some bleeding issues. So I was bleeding. I remember feeling a little bit lightheaded, a little bit dizzy, and having like uncontrollable shakes. I remember at one point telling my husband to hold him because I was just shaking so much. I was going to give him like that shaking baby syndrome. I was like, I cannot hold it right now. I'm like shaking like a leaf. My husband kept asking if I was cold. I said, no, I'm not cold. It's just like the adrenaline after giving birth. Some women just experience that. And I didn't have that with my daughter, but I did have it with my son. So, after that, bleeding and everything was okay. We stayed in that room for about 2 hours. They took my Foley catheter out. Everything was good. I just couldn't feel anything. Like, this was a good epidural. I couldn't feel anything. Couldn't get up to put like the whole diaper pad, all the things on. They just did it for me while I was laying in the bed because I literally couldn't feel anything to walk or anything. Get moved over to the other room. Still couldn't feel anything. They did have to straight cath me because I couldn't feel and I couldn't pee or get up or anything, which was fine. Still couldn't feel, so it's not like I felt it. But yeah, with him, because I had that crazy, scary experience with my daughter, being in the nursery, or not being in the nursery, being with us, and I was so tired, I did not want to chance that again. So once we got to the other room, breastfed him and sent him to the nursery where they could watch him and keep an eye on him, and I could try to get some rest because at this point I was dead exhausted again from working 3 night shifts in a row, getting no sleep, being up the whole day and night, way past 24 hours. But yeah, it was just such a crazy experience. And with him, he did not have to stay later or anything. We went home the next day. So they said you had to stay for exactly 24 hours with a vaginal birth. I gave birth to my son at 8:03 p.m. and we rolled out that hospital at like 8:10 the next day. My husband was asking if I wanted to, like, they said I could stay another night with insurance, and I was like, no, because in the hospital I get like no sleep. I worked at the hospital. I knew a lot of these people. I just want to be at home in my own bed, comfy, cozy. I missed my daughter. It was, yeah, my daughter was staying with my parents at the time. They stayed overnight. She stayed overnight with them while my husband was with me at the hospital. I missed her, and I just wanted to be cozy, comfy in my own bed and do my own thing. So we left at like 8 something at night and went home, and we lived about 30 minutes away from the hospital. It was late when we got home, and I just didn't even care. I just wanted to just lay in my own bed because the hospital beds are just not very comfy. So did that, and he was perfectly healthy and fine. He was great at all of his newborn screening, could hear well. They thought he could see well. Went to his doctor's appointment the next day, gave birth to him on a Thursday, so we had our appointment with the doctor on a Friday, and everything checked out. And that is his birth story. It was a super awesome feeling just getting to have my daughter come and visit in the hospital and being a big sister and seeing her baby brother for the first time. That was a magical moment. She came in and got to see him and got to see the baby that was in mommy's belly, and she is the best big sister I could have asked for him. And they're both just doing so good and thriving. And yeah, that is his birth story. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment them down below. And I would love to hear some of your guys' birth stories. I love babies and just hearing everyone's stories because they are just so unique. One baby could be just completely so different from the other baby. I had a girl, I've had a boy, I had a 6-pounder and an 8-pounder. I have been early and I've been late. So like, it's crazy how one pregnancy could vary from the other. One labor could vary from the other, and I just think it's so cool. But yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video.